yellow arrows. But these boxes are meant to be like categories of living things. So autotroph, heterotroph, or producer consumer. Questions on this one? And so it's a little reminder to kind of get your head back into what we were talking about last time. We kind of left off with the big idea that in an ecosystem, energy is flowing, right? It starts at point A, the sun. It goes into the bodies of living things. Those are very energetic chemicals that make up the bodies of living things. And then it ends up as heat. So it's kind of a path through the ecosystem. Whereas matter goes around and around. And I saw on our little exit slide last time, someone came up with an awesome way to remember it. They said, with matter, it doesn't matter where you start tracing the path, right? Because there really is no start. It's just a cycle that goes round and round. So that was awesome. I'm definitely feeling that little memory trick. Okay. So that was a little warm up to get your head back into thinking about ecology and ecosystem. So some reminders. I'm not assigning new readings this week, okay? So if you got a little behind, if you haven't read the ecology stuff yet, please catch up on that this week. And then a week from this coming Thursday, so not next time we meet, but a week from then, we're doing the final exam. Yesterday I sent out a study guide that has a whole bunch of slides, but a lot less slides than going through all the slides this semester, right? So hopefully that helps you, just another tool to kind of help you be confident about what's going to be on the final, how much different topics are going to show up on the final. Like there's some topics there might only be 1 or 2 questions on, others there might be 6 or 8 questions. So check the study guide for all of that information. Okay. So today we're learning more ecology. So we're going to talk about food webs, biomagnification, some biogeochemical cycles, and then a bit of population biology. So we have a lot to get to. Okay. Okay, so before we get into food webs, I did want to recap a little bit from last time, this idea about energy in trophic levels of a food chain. So this slide is from the study guide, and it's good to kind of relate this back to big ideas that we covered earlier in the semester. So one of the big ideas we covered earlier in the semester is that molecules can store energy, okay? Some molecules store a lot of energy, some molecules store very little. All molecules store at least a little. So an example of that is a protein, right? A huge, big molecule, it's going to store a lot of energy. Individual amino acids are going to store less energy. So when we start thinking about this in the context of ecosystems, you can actually put numbers to it. And so when we talk about the energy transfer between trophic levels, so trophic just means eating, so levels at which animals and levels at which consumers eat, right? Okay, so remember the first level means it's something that directly eats plants. And so when you put numbers to it, what you see is that, so what this bar graph is quantifying the energy in the bodies of all the plants. Okay, so it's like really zooming out and looking at the ecosystem as a whole. So if we just try to tally up the energy that's there, that's making up the bodies of those plants, it's really energetic molecules, and that's a lot of energy, right? but not very much of it ends up in the bodies of the things that eat the plants, okay? So I'm not talking about like individual, so let's see, what ecosystem is this? This is a spring in Florida. So the producers are algae. Water lettuce is a kind of algae. Eelgrass is a plant, so algae and plants are the things that are actually making those big energetic chemicals. But then the things that are eating the producers, that's like turtles, snails, mullets of fish. If you added up the energy in all of the bodies of all of those, I mean, look how little you get compared to what's there. Okay? So that's what we mean when we say that the energy declines dramatically as you go up the food chain. That's why food chain is a really powerful model, a really powerful way to look at what's going on in ecosystems. Okay, so that's a bit of review from last time. So now let's think about food webs, okay? So last time we talked about food chains, and food chain was just a linear model. A food chain really shines when you're talking about trophic levels, right? Because it always starts at a producer and it's very clear what level you're at. But sometimes if you're thinking about the whole ecosystem, you might want a food web model. Because a food web is showing, oh, all of these chains are really interconnected, right? A lot of things don't just eat one thing. So go ahead and answer that question. So the robin is this bird here. This kind of reddish chest on the bird, that's a robin. So according to the model, what does it eat? Oh, sorry, which organisms eat the robin? Yes. Which organisms eat the robin, according to this model? So you gotta zoom in, you gotta really look at those arrows. And the arrows are often very counterintuitive to people. So make sure your image makes sense. What eats the robin? Think about the direction of the arrow is showing you the direction that energy and material is going.
No, what is going on? I can pull out.
Oh, you know what? I think I realized I didn't allow you to choose more than one, did I? Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll just pick out one correct answer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, how many correct answers are there?
It's okay, it happens. Don't you worry.
Correct answer. We'll pick out one.
I did not mean
A mix from the class. Anybody want a little help on this one? Makes sense?
yes. But I'm like, I mean, I'm not because this is my entry. I could be wrong. But the thing is, I have a lot of
Okay. Yeah, so we got snake and owl mostly. Those are the correct answers. A spider's not going to eat a huge bird. Right? A frog's not going to eat a huge bird. So yeah, it can be, if you get a question like this on the test, and it's, so you always kind of want to sanity check your answer, right? Like, do you think a spider can eat this bird? Like, I mean, maybe if it died and it was like down here in the decomposers, but up here we're kind of talking about like living trophic interactions. That would be a scary spider. So kind of sanity check your answers if you ever like see a question like that on the test, because the arrows are very counterintuitive to a lot of people. It's not, what the arrows say is not robin eats owl, it's robin is eaten by owl, right? The robin's giving energy and material, that energy and material from the robin is flowing into the owl. That's why the arrow points towards the owl. Okay. So I think we basically got it, but here's the opposite question. Okay, so which things are the robin eating? Which things does the robin eat? So you gotta zoom in on the robin and think about which arrows are going into the little robin box. And yeah, I know you can only put in one correct answer, but there's more than one.
Oh, you know what? That's more.
Yeah, we got a spider down there, we got a centipede.
There's a rock.
Okay, those you're confident on?
Spiders and. Yeah.
I'll put some.
Okay. Centipede, yes. Spider, yes. Beetle, yes. All right, awesome. So yeah, all three of those are correct answers. So you're looking at the robin, you're seeing where is the robin getting arrows that are going into the robin. Exactly. Okay, last question on this figure. Circle the organisms that eat dead material. So that's the decomposer. So where on this figure is the decomposer?
Dead composer. Wait, but like I'm thinking.
Yeah. So is there an arrow going into the robin that comes from the dead material?
Wait, owl.
No. But the robin can die.
So like a fish.
Bacteria. That's all. All right, yes. So down there at the bottom are the decomposers. Yeah. Yeah. So all those arrows going down are just saying, okay, all these things. All these things might die, and their body might be eaten by bacteria, fungus, invertebrates like worms. That's typically the type of thing we're thinking about when we think about decomposition. Okay, so that's really all I'm going to say about food webs. The next topic I want to talk about before we move on from the general idea of trophic levels is, again, I was saying that like food chains and trophic levels, it's a really powerful lens to look at the world with, okay? So it's not just random of, everything eats everything. It's things start with a producer, there's a lot of energy in the producers, and then there's levels of how far away from a producer something is. And one of the big implications of this actually has to do with certain toxic substances. So there are some substances in the environment, not all of them, that it's mostly things that dissolve in fat. That what happens is how much they build up in the body of something depends on where it is in the food chain. So again, this idea of trophic level really tells you something about the biology that's going on here. So mercury is one example. So Hg is mercury. And there's mercury in the environment. And if mercury gets to too high level in an animal body, there's a lot of negative impacts. If it's at a low level, then it doesn't really do anything. So what this diagram is showing is that you have some little plankton here that are eating maybe like some algae and whatnot, and they don't really get that much mercury. But then these fish that eat the plankton, they have to eat a lot of plankton, they get more mercury. These fish that eat other fish, they get even more mercury. This little seal that's eating the fish, that eats the plankton, it gets even more mercury. So it's called bioaccumulation, because as you go up the food chain, you accumulate more and more of this stuff. It also happens over time. So down here you have a little flounder or sole, and if it's a baby, it's not really going to have much, but over time, that amount of mercury builds up in its body. Yeah, as it's growing bigger and over its life, it's just like it's processed more food through it, and it's just like hanging on to the mercury. The mercury dissolves in fat substances. So here's another example with some data of some real things. I should have put a picture on here. You all know killer whales, right? It's like Shamu or Free Willy, right? Really big black and white dolphins. So killer whales are quite interesting because as a species, they eat a lot of different things. But an individual killer whale does not eat a lot of different things. It depends on its group. Each little group of killer whales specializes in what they eat. And so there are killer whales that eat mammals, like seals, and there are killer whales that eat fish, okay? So the killer whales that eat mammals, that eat seals, is that going to be a higher trophic level or a lower trophic level? Higher, yeah, right? Because the seals eat fish, so the killer whales even above that. And so what this graph is showing, you can kind of focus on this middle line here. It's showing, okay, there's a lot of variation, but on average, a seal-eating killer whale is going to have more mercury than a fish-eating killer whale. So this blue and green is showing you the population overall. This other graph is showing you individual whales, okay? And the dotted line, everything to the left of the dotted line is the seal-eating ones. And so you can see, again, there's individual variation, but the seal-eating ones are the ones who are going over this really high threshold. This threshold is where, if you have that much, you have a very high risk of actually having health effects from it. This lower bar is kind of another threshold of like, well, down here you have some risk of health effects. So if you're below the low red line, it probably doesn't matter. If you're above the high red line, it definitely does matter. Okay, so that's just another real example of even within one species, you can have a difference in trophic level that makes a difference to their lives. Just kind of an FYI for us, it does come into like food recommendations that are made for people, okay? So depending on what kind of seafood you eat, some seafood has more mercury than others. And what determines it is it something that's high on the food chain, like a tuna fish? Or is it something that's low on the food chain, like a sardine? So if you're trying to avoid mercury, go for the sardine rather than the tuna. And
I mean, salmon's
and yeah, you can look up government recommendations about it. Again, so there's kind of thresholds, right? So and it builds up. So if a person eats a lot of seafood over their lifetime, it builds up. If a person just eats seafood now and then, it probably doesn't matter. And there's also a difference there's a special concern for women who are going to be breastfeeding infants. Again, because the substance dissolves in the fat, and there's fat in the milk, and so that substance gets transferred. So that's why there's different recommendations as far as seafood for women who want to breastfeed children. Seafood? Not that I know of, but yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so there are definitely risks associated with living things in raw fish, right, like parasites. But I think the mercury is probably okay, so there you go. Trophic levels, paying attention to them and kind of having that lens to look through things can affect our own lives and our own food choices. Okay. So we're going to switch gears a bit now from food chains, and we're going to talk about something that's still related, But we're going to start talking about those cycles of matter. And so I want you to start with this exercise of a Venn diagram. Okay, so Venn diagram, you know, in the middle you put things that are true of coal and a banana. On the edge here, things that are only true of a banana. On the edge here, things that are only true about coal. Okay, so a little brainstorm for you. What does coal and a banana even have in common? Can you think of anything for the middle there? Coming up with some ideas on the edges shouldn't be too hard, right? They're pretty different things. And it's a brainstorm. Don't be afraid to put things like simple things like the color, the texture.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You don't have to
It does.
be
Enquan's potassium.
you don't have to be super fancy or technical. But yeah, after you put a few obvious things, talk it over with your partner, see if you can come up with some non-obvious things.
What is coal made out of? Let me look it up.
No, but this is saying for the color, this is saying a banana is black. I guess a rotten
After a
one,
while,
huh?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, I didn't specify a nice, fresh banana.
Carbon and hydrocarbons? What?
Okay. Try to resist the temptation to just Google it. What can you come up with from your brain?
Black. Yeah.
You were crying?
Use flammable, yeah. Use for fire. Use for
It prevents it from cracking. If it's moisturizing.
Kind of all tasty.
Definitely provides energy, right?
That's stupid videos on YouTube where coal and they would have a really good diet.
Oh yeah, it's like great.
Or should keep both light on fire? I feel like you could light a banana on fire.
Okay, interesting. Questions coming up. Are they both flammable? You probably have to dry it out, right? But
Yeah,
I bet you could.
The tip of it, you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think. We should test it.
Just like a rotten banana. Yeah, soft.
Tasty. Oh, this one's rough. This is like chalk.
What else? One's edible and one's not.
Yeah. They're moist. Yeah. What else? Gooey.
Okay, let's take a look.
What's a good comparison?
Yeah, I think some people are really good.
They die of it.
Oh, you can make more than
I couldn't put it.
Oh, I know. Sorry to cut it off. Okay, let's take a look. Natural resource. Okay, I like that. Yeah, they're both natural resources. One's a plant, one's a mineral. Different colors. Yeah, quite a few people said both are black. I guess both can be black. Yeah. Yeah, black. What's potassium? Does coal contain potassium? Okay. Should not eat. Very good. Yeah, can eat. Flammable question mark. I like it. I would say yeah, flammable. You'd have to dry the banana out. Bananas have a lot of water in them. But yeah, if you dried it out enough, for sure. Okay, both costs money, give you minerals. Yeah, this one comes from trees. Good. Oh, they didn't come up with anything in the middle, but good ideas on the edge there. Yellow, smushy versus hard. Oh, this is a new one we haven't seen yet. Made of atoms. Yeah. Okay. So definitely drawing on some stuff that's coming up in this class, right? They're made of atoms. Hey, anybody want to build on this? Like, so we've mentioned potassium. What other atom might be worth mentioning here? Carbon, yeah, carbon could go in the middle. Okay. So yeah, we got there as a class, right? Carbon. So what is going on here?
Wait, what did I tell you?
Let's see if we can get one projector.
But that was for English.
All my fingers have been
Yeah. Like mindfulness, like learning that stuff, like I don't feel like theater they don't grade it.
Okay, so this is another slide taken from your study guide. Like, for sure, carbon is a big idea in this class, but I want you to leave biology with a different lens on the world that you look around, right? Knowing that the bodies of living things are mostly carbon. So that banana is mostly carbon. The coal as well is going to have a lot of carbon. So carbon, and the other one that a lot of people did kind of home in on was energy, okay? So energy to fuel electricity from the coal, right? And energy to like go run or do whatever you want if you eat the banana. Or if you dry it out and light it on fire, you can warm yourself by the fire, okay? So yeah, they both are a source of energy. They both have a lot of carbon atoms. I want to make sure we start to think about, so we're going to be thinking about these carbon atoms and how they move through the ecosystem. And so a carbon atom, you might find it in a banana, you might find it in a coal. In both of those objects, the carbon is in chemicals that are very high in energy, right? So remember we were saying some molecules store a lot of energy, some don't, okay? So keep in mind that when carbon's in the air, it's in carbon dioxide, okay? So carbon dioxide contains carbon atoms, but that is not something we can burn, right? In fact, a lot of fire extinguishers, that's what it is, right? So it's not a very energetic form of carbon, okay? Okay, so let's let this
My name is Peter, and I'm
climate scientist give us a little perspective on this banana and coal comparison.
Hi, my name is Peter, and I'm an earth scientist at NASA, and I'd like to talk to you about how fossil fuels are driving us bananas. This is a banana, and this is a chunk of coal. And they're about as different as two things can be. The banana is soft, and it's delicious, and it's fun to eat. And the coal, well, it sure isn't soft, and it definitely isn't delicious, but it does a very good job of generating electricity when it's burned. They're much more alike than they seem, however. They're both made by plants, and the plants have stored energy in the banana and in the coal from sunlight. And also, they've stored carbon gas from the atmosphere. Now, when I eat the banana, my body takes the energy that the plant stored from the sun in the banana, and I can use it to run and to jump. And after I've used that energy, I breathe out the carbon gas back into the atmosphere. Now, the coal, when we burn this, that energy that the plant stored from the sun is burned and is used to make electricity. And all the carbon gas that the plants have stored in the coal goes back into the air around us. In the banana is young, fast carbon. It was carbon in the atmosphere just a few months ago, and is released back within minutes of the time that I've eaten it. The coal, plants took the coal carbon out of the air millions and millions of years ago, long before there were people, or even before there were dinosaurs, and it's been locked up under the earth ever since. And it would have stayed locked up in the earth if people didn't dig the coal up and burn it. Well, why do I care? Because carbon in the atmosphere acts like a blanket, making the planet get warmer. At NASA, we use satellites to study the Earth and how it's changing. And we can see that the ice caps and the glaciers are melting, and that the land and the atmosphere and the ocean are getting warmer. So I know that it's important that we are very careful about how we produce and use energy so that we burn less fossil fuels so we can keep the planet from getting too warm.
Okay. Okay, so he had even some different things in his Venn diagram, right? He said that, well, they're both made by plants, ultimately. The stored energy, and for both of them, ultimately came from the sun. And he also had some different things on the edges of his Venn diagram, right? He had the fast carbon and the banana. So banana has carbon that, just not long ago was in the air, whereas the coal is part of a much longer, slower cycle. The coal carbon has been out of the air for a long time. Okay, so let's kind of put this all together and start thinking about the carbon cycle. So this diagram is showing some arrows of where carbon atoms go, okay? So we've talked about when carbon's in the air, it can be in other molecules as well, but a lot of times we're talking about CO2. And then all these bodies of plants and animals are made up of carbon. All these bodies of the phytoplankton are made up of carbon. All this coal and oil buried in the ground is made of carbon. So there's all these different locations that carbon can be, and there's processes that move carbon from one place to another. What's going on here? Okay, so yeah, let's dig into this figure a little bit, and your task here is to pick out a color and just trace over the arrows that are getting carbon out of the atmosphere. And then check in with your partner, be ready to answer out loud, kind of what are these arrows representing? These arrows that are taking carbon out of the atmosphere. If you're stuck on this, feel free to raise your hand.
Are we going to get all the arrows that get carbon dioxide out? Like, so then it would be these. This is going in. No, because it's going in.
Oh, whoops, sorry. Let's take a look at some of our responses. Yeah, so I agree with this person. So you have an arrow going into the plants, you have an arrow going into the phytoplankton. What are we thinking? What are these arrows talking about? How is carbon dioxide getting from the air into plants, into phytoplankton? Yeah, photosynthesis, okay? So, I know some people are struggling to come up with that, right? So we gotta make connections with some of our big topics, right? Photosynthesis. So for sure on the final, kind of both being able to know the equation for photosynthesis. You don't have to know the balanced equation or even like the chemical formula for glucose, that's okay. But you gotta know, hey, it's a sugar, that's a carb, so that's a molecule that has carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, right? So it's a big carbon, oxygen, hydrogen molecule. So it needs carbon to be built. That carbon comes from carbon dioxide, right? Remember the poor people who were trying to have a nice day at the beach and were being bothered about, oh, how does a tree grow? Where does it get the carbon, right? It gets it out of the air, okay? So that's what those arrows are representing. The phytoplankton can get the carbon out of the air, plants can get the carbon out of the air. Yeah? Good on that one? Okay. Okay, so now trace a loop representing the fast carbon path, okay? So the scientist was talking about, hey, some carbon, it just bounces back and forth into and out of the air really quickly. So can you draw a loop that represents that? Your loop can go through just plants or through animals, so it could be a plant that's eaten by an animal and then goes back into the air, or it can just be, it goes into a plant and then goes back into the air. Yeah, and you can see this diagram doesn't have all the arrows, right? Because it looks like it's only path out of the phytoplankton and down. But phytoplankton put it back into the air also, so you could even draw in your own arrow there if you want. Okay, let's take a look at some of these. Awesome, yeah, this person's still working, you got it. Yeah, so this was a plant that then died, and then some worm or bacteria breathed out some carbon back into the atmosphere. That's good. Here, a plant did some photosynthesis, and then did some respiration. Right? Plants can do both. So that makes a loop. That's the same loop. That one's good. Yep, that one's good. That's the same loop. Did anyone do a loop with animals? Okay, this one takes a long time. Okay, this is the other loop. We're looking for fast loops. Let's see. That's the decomposer loop. This one's good. Yeah. Here we go. Here's one that goes through animals. So the plant sucks the carbon out of the air. Then the plant dies and gets decomposed, I guess, because it went into the decomposers. So then the animal must have eaten a worm or something, and then the animal breathes out the carbon dioxide. Okay? So there are different paths that an individual carbon atom can take. But all of these ones that I showed, it's a matter of days or hours or weeks. It's going from the air into the body of something back to the air, right? That's what the scientist meant when he said fast carbon. Okay, I think we kind of already covered this, but it's a good check-in question. So that arrow that's going from the decomposers into the air, what's that about? So again, carbon in the air, photosynthesis is going to suck the carbon out of the air into the body of the plant. Then maybe some leaves fall to the ground or the whole plant dies. And that is down here in the soil. So what's going on in the soil? Well, decomposers might be eating it, right? And decomposers are consumers, just like other consumers. So if they're eating that organic stuff and using the energy, they're going to be exhaling the carbon back out in a low energy form, carbon dioxide. Good. Okay, so just a reminder on visual. So decomposers, they are heterotrophs, they're consumers, just like other consumers. They just happen to feed on dead stuff. Okay, so now let's talk about fossil fuels. So fossil fuels, you're not going to be required to learn a lot of details about it, but I want you to know the big picture. The big picture is that fossil fuels, the main categories are coal, oil, natural gas. And the steps to form each of them are slightly different, okay? But what the steps have in common is that it has to start with plants, okay? So like you said, we're talking about plants that lived way back before the dinosaurs, usually. Because this process to change the body of a plant into a fossil fuel takes a long, long time. It takes a long time. It also means that particular plant has to have escaped the decomposers, right? So if a plant goes into the soil and gets decomposed, those big energetic carbon molecules, the energy gets used, and carbon dioxide, low energy carbon, ends up in the air, right? But if there are conditions that are just right that make it really hard for decomposers to do their thing, then you can get some plant matter piling up and piling up and piling up, more than the decomposers can handle. So that's step one. You have to somehow escape the decomposers. Then you need time, as in millions and millions of years. Pressure, heat. Okay, pressure and heat tend to go together. So these things get buried so deep, and so that leads to chemical transformation. Okay, so that's how you can go from the body of a plant to something that looks totally different, like coal. A few people still writing. Do we need a little more time on this slide, or are we good? Good? Okay. So that's what he was talking about when he said, hey, the carbon, that's a slow loop, okay? Because that formation of fossil fuels takes a long, long time. So now draw a loop that goes through the fossil fuels. Draw a slow loop. That's going to take a long time for the carbon to go around.
Oh, this is not that one. That one is. Yeah, it's okay. I hope she was.
Okay. Yep, I agree with this person. So plants, and they kind of go into this like they're in danger of being decomposed, but then they escape the decomposers. They become fossil fuels, and then we burn the fossil fuels. Yeah, phytoplankton So yeah, I want a loop that goes through the fossil fuels. This loop is kind of skipping over the fossil fuels. Phytoplankton can also contribute to fossil fuels, but usually we think about land plants. It just depends on the specific fossil fuel. Yeah, so this looks good. Yeah, this one's going through the volcano instead of us burning it. So yeah, there are natural processes that can eventually get some of that trapped carbon back into the atmosphere. So that's valid. But yeah, I would say this loop was kind of the main one I was looking for. Okay, questions on that? So if you haven't already jotted down a note about what the guy in the video was saying about greenhouse gases, that is something worth getting in your notes. So this human impact on the carbon cycle, of course, is a big deal because if we're taking carbon that was on the slow train, right, and we're digging it up and we're putting it back into the atmosphere, that's going to up the amount of carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means that it has a strong effect on the temperature of the planet. I'm guessing that that's not new to anybody, right? You've heard of greenhouse gases, right? You've heard of global climate change. Well, we've all heard of it, but I think it is definitely still worth spending a little time kind of understanding how this topic connects to the carbon cycle. So I want to spend, I guess we'll do a full 5 minutes. I want to keep going, we have a lot to get to today, but yeah, I will give you 5 minutes. So I'm going to put this on self-paced because after you've spent a couple minutes exploring this website, I want you to go to the next slide and share something about either what you learned that's new that you didn't already know about carbon and climate change, or a question. So either way, so that's on the next slide.
I think so.
And you can work on this as partners if you want.
Together.
I like how this website is organized, kind of. You can choose what you want to explore, the past, the present, or the future.
Migration. Oh, mitigation.
Makes sense to y'all, or just about photosynthesis? Or like almost like just open a new tab.
Vice
Yep, and you can pick what interests you more, the past or present.
BC ice free summer.
Okay, we'll do 3 more minutes. 2.5 more minutes. 2.5 more minutes.
The lights. Oh, I think it's like oh, I didn't see that. Wait, what is it? 400. Should we put out a survey?
Okay, if you haven't already, start typing something in the next slide. Go forward 1 slide, have space to type something. You can share something new you learned or a question that you thought of based on what you explored. And you can work together if you want. Enter a response together. Just okay, 30 more seconds. Wrap up what you're writing. 30 more seconds. Try to finish the sentence you're on. Okay. Sorry, I know a lot of you are still working. Let's just take a look at a few responses, and if you are still working, you can share out loud what you're thinking. So this person said, I thought it was interesting that the human species went so long without using carbon. Makes me wonder, what was the first innovation thanks to carbon use? Yeah, wonderful question. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah. I mean, you can think about large-scale deforestation kind of on the same continuum as fossil fuels, right? So that burning the carbon that was in the forest as a source of energy. The Arctic could be sea ice-free in summer by 2050. Okay. Yep. We have known that carbon emissions will cause global warming since 1824, but we still keep making it worse as a population. Right, so this idea of global warming is not a new one. It's pretty basic science. People have known about it for a long time. Okay, so I just picked out a couple. How about a few volunteers to share out loud, especially if you're typing that stuff. What else did you find out? Yeah, thanks.
I thought it was interesting that Asia was one of the biggest emitters of CO2, and that it was mostly emitted during the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, good observation, good patterns, yeah. Good. Other volunteers? Yeah, Dan.
Mine was just more about the question, because I was looking at the human impact, that little meter to the right, and how there was a huge jump in the year 1990 to the 2000s. So just looking at that, maybe wonder like what would be the human impact in like the next 50 years, if it's a real
this side of the room. Something you learned or a question you came up with?
Oh yeah, it's gonna get real hot, year 2000.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it's at like 3.2 Celsius.
3.2 Celsius as a prediction? Yeah, so it depends, right? What happens? You have to, especially the further out you go, the more uncertain. But, yep, it's definitely still trending towards hotter, right? Okay. So we're going to switch gears from the carbon cycle. And we're going to start talking about a different atom, okay? So, let's review one more time. Here, I'll put up the equation again for photosynthesis. And there's a task there on the slide for you related to photosynthesis. So one thing for the final, I think I'll make sure, I haven't really done a good job on the last test of making sure that if you want some scratch paper, you know, you're welcome to have scratch paper next to you, because I really want you to have already memorized a few things, right? This is one of them, for sure. The equation for photosynthesis. And once you memorize this, then you know cellular respiration, just the other way around. And so a little test-taking strategy, if there's something like that that you know is going to come up that you have in your head, sometimes it helps to just jot it on the paper first and then have it next to you while you're answering questions. Okay, so we have hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon. We learned those are the most common atoms in living things. We learned about photosynthesis, right? And if you think about the atoms in photosynthesis, oh no, there's no nitrogen, right? There's a carbon, there's an oxygen, there's a hydrogen. Carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. There's no nitrogen involved, right? So we really haven't talked about nitrogen yet as far as nitrogen cycling around, okay? So photosynthesis is a big part of how plants grow. But there's other chemical pathways that are going to bring in the nitrogen, yeah? So if we go back to this slide that we started on, let's take a look at those inorganic nutrients, right? The carbon dioxide, that's involved in photosynthesis. The water, that's involved in photosynthesis. But then we have the fertilizer. Right? Okay, so all this fertilizer stuff, it's not directly involved in photosynthesis, but it is involved in plant growth, okay? So let's talk about nitrogen and how it cycles around in living things and non-living things, okay? So starting with non-living things, the air is mostly nitrogen. For me, I find it really relevant to my hobbies because I like to scuba dive, and scuba divers have to be careful about pressure because when they go underwater, nitrogen starts dissolving in the body more than it normally does. If they come up too fast, it comes out of solution, and then they get the bends. So nitrogen, in most of our everyday life, we just breathe it in, breathe it out. It doesn't react with anything, kind of doesn't matter. But for scuba diving, it kind of does matter.